Hi, how is it going? Welcome to Code with Z. Today's problem is LeetCode number 6, Zigzag Conversion. Now, I'm not gonna lie, when I first saw this problem, it actually humbled me a lot. But I have a pretty simple solution for you that is so easy to implement. But first, let's understand the problem. So we have a string here that says PayPal is hiring, and we're also given a number of rows, and we basically have to convert this PayPal is hiring to this text here. So we have this example here that shows how we actually got this result. And how it actually works is that basically we have 3 rows, and that was actually given to us by the question itself. And we gotta write our text or our string in this way. So as you can see, P-A-Y, right? So we have 3 rows. So row number 1, P, row number 2, A, row number 3, Y. And then for the other 3 characters, which are P-A-L, we actually gonna go in a zigzag way. So basically we're gonna go to P, and P is gonna be in the second row, and then A, and then we're gonna go down again. So we have L in the second row as well. And we're gonna repeat this process for all of our characters, and at the end we're gonna join the rows that we have here to get this result. So as you can see, the first row is P-A-H-N, and as you can see, P-A-H-N. The second row is this, and we have this, which is the result of the second row. So we're basically joining the rows that we have. The solution that we have is so simple that you're not gonna believe it. And I'll visualize the whole process for you, so I make sure you understand this problem once and for all. Alright, so we have our text here and the number of rows as well. These 2 were given to us by the question itself. And this is also the example that we were given, and we're just gonna use it as a roadmap to kind of check if we're actually on the right path or not. And then at the end, we gotta return this text here. All right, let's start. So the first things that we need are 3 empty strings. Why 3? Because the number of our rows are 3. These strings are gonna represent our rows, and we're gonna add the characters that are related to each row inside of these strings. So for example, for the first row, we need to have P-A-H-N inside this string by the end of our code, and we need to have these letters that are related to the second row inside of our second string, and same thing for our third string. And at the end, we're just gonna join these together and return it as our result. But how are we gonna actually do this? So it's pretty simple. Let's move these here. We're gonna put these 3 strings inside of an array, and we're gonna call it rows array, because why not? Then we're gonna define a variable called direction, and we're gonna initialize it to true, and we're gonna define another variable called count and initialize it to 0. And that's everything we need. And don't worry, I will not finish this video until you actually understand the solution. Alright, so first of all, we can guess that we need to loop through each character here. So we're gonna need a for loop. Inside of our for loop, we're gonna do 3 simple stuff. The first one is, we're gonna add the current character to the count index of our array. What does that mean? So for example, in our for loop, we're looking at P, right? This is just an example. So our character is actually P. So we're gonna add our P to the first index of our array. The first index of our array is this string here. So we're just gonna add P to it. And that's it. So long story short, grab this and put it here. The second thing that we do in our algorithm is checking the value of direction. If it is true, we're gonna increment count. And if it is false, we're gonna decrement count. And as you can see in the beginning, direction is true. So we're gonna say if direction is true, which it is, increment count. So we're gonna go from 0 to 1. So count is gonna be 1. The third and final thing that we do is checking the value of count. If count is equal to number of rows minus 1, and again, this was given to us by the question here. And if it was, we're gonna assign false to direction. So direction is gonna be false. And if count was equal to 0, we're gonna assign true to direction. So direction is gonna be true. And believe it or not, this is the whole algorithm. Now let's visualize it. So we're gonna be in round 1. So this is the round 1 of our loop. And as you can see, we're pointing to the first letter in our string because we're looping from the beginning to the end. Alright, so our current character is P, and here in the algorithm, the first step of it says that we need to add the current character to our array. Which index of our array? The count index. What's the value of count? Well, count is 0. So you have to add P to here because this is our array, and currently count is 0, so we're gonna add P to the first index of our array, and the first index of our array is this string. So let's do that. Alright, step 1 is done. The second step says if direction is true, increment count. Alright, direction is actually true, so let's increment count, and now count is actually equal to 1. Step 2 done. Now let's check for step 3. It says if count is equal to number of rows minus 1, so number of rows is actually 3, so is count equal to 3 minus 1, which is 2? No, count is actually equal to 1, and 1 is not equal to 2. So we're not gonna check this here. Else we're gonna check if count is equal to 0, and no, count is not equal to 0, so we're not gonna check this as well. All right, our first round is done. So let's move on to the next round, and in our second round, we're actually gonna be pointing to our second character because we're in the second round, and this is gonna be our current character. So we're gonna say again, add the current character to rows array, but at the count index, and the count index is 1, so we're gonna add a to this string here because the index of this string is 1 and count is 1. Then we're gonna move on to step 2. We're gonna check the value of direction. Direction is equal to true, so we're gonna increment count. Let's increment count, and that's it. Step 1 and 2 done. For step 3, we're gonna check if count, which is 2, is equal to number of rows minus 1. Number of rows is 3 minus 1, 2. So 2 is actually equal to 2. So in this case, we're gonna make direction be equal to false. So let's do that. Now direction is equal to false, and the second line says if count is equal to 0 and count is not equal to 0. So we're not gonna check this, and the second round of our loop is done. Let's move on to the third round. This is gonna be our current character in our third round. So we're gonna add the current character to our array, and count is 2, and the index of 2 is actually pointing to this string here. So we're gonna add y to this string. So let's do that. Then we're gonna check the value of direction. We know it's actually false, so we're gonna come here and we're gonna decrement count. All right, let's do that. So count is actually equal to 1. And then at the final step, we're gonna check if count is equal to 2 because number of rows minus 1 is equal to 2. And we know it's not, and we know it's not equal to 0. So we're just gonna skip this and move on to the next round. So in our fourth round, the current character is gonna be p. We're gonna add the current character to our rows array at the count index. Count is gonna be 1. The string with the index of 1 is gonna be this, so we're gonna add p to this string here, like so. Then we're gonna check the value of direction. It's currently false, so we're gonna decrement count. So let's do that. And then we're gonna check if count is equal to number of rows minus 1, and it's not. But the next one says if count is equal to 0, and we know it is because here count is 0. We're gonna assign true to direction. So basically direction is gonna be true again. So let's do that. All right, we're done with this round. Let's move on to the next round. In our next round, our current character is gonna be a. So we're gonna add a to the rows array at the count index. Count is gonna be equal to 0. So we're gonna add a here because this is the string that has the index of 0. So let's do that. We're done with step 1. Let's move on to step 2. Step 2 says if direction is equal to true, increment count. We know it is true, so we're gonna increment count and it's gonna be equal to 1. And then we're gonna check if count is equal to number of rows minus 1, and it's not. And then we're gonna check if count is equal to 0, and again, it's not. So we're gonna move on to the next round. As you can slowly see, we're actually getting closer to our example. So PA here, AP, AP, and Y. All right, in our sixth round, our current character is gonna be L. We're gonna add L to the rows array at the count index. Count is 1, so L is gonna be added to here. Then we're gonna check if direction is true. It is, so we're gonna increment count. And count is incremented. Then we're gonna check if count is equal to number of rows minus 1. It is, because number of rows minus 1 is 2 and count is equal to 2. So we're gonna assign false to direction. So direction is gonna be false. Let's do that. And then we're gonna move on to the next round. So we're actually at the round 7 and our current character is gonna be I. We're gonna add I to our rows array at the count index, and it's gonna be this one because this is the string that has the index of 2. So let's do that. Then we're gonna check the value of direction. Direction is false, so we're gonna decrement count. Let's decrement count here, and we're gonna move on to step 3, and count is not equal to 2 or 0. So we're just gonna skip this. And we're gonna move on to the next round. And again, same thing, we're gonna add the current character, which is S, to our array. Count is actually equal to 1, so we're gonna add S to here. Then we're gonna check the value of direction. Direction is false, so we're gonna decrement count, and count is gonna be equal to 0. So in step 3, when we say if count is equal to 0, it actually is equal to 0. So we're gonna assign true to direction. So this means direction is gonna be equal to true. So let's do that. And then let's move on to the next round. So now we're actually in the 9th round. We're gonna add H, which is our current character, to our array at the count index. Count is 0, so we're gonna add H here. Then we're gonna check the value of direction again, and it's actually true, so we're gonna increment count. So let's do that. And then we're gonna check step 3, and count is not equal to 2 nor equal to 0. So we're just gonna move on. Let's go for the 10th round. In our 10th round, our current character is gonna be I. Let's add I to our array at the count index. Count is currently 1, so let's add I here. Direction is actually true, so we're gonna increment count. Count is actually incremented, and then we're gonna check if count is equal to 2, and it is, so direction is gonna be false, so we're actually gonna do that, and then we're gonna move on to the 11th round. In our 11th round, our current character is gonna be R. We're gonna add it to our array at the count index, which is 2, so let's add it here. Direction is false, so let's actually decrement count here. count is equal to 1. We're gonna check if count is equal to 2 or 0. None of them are true. So we're gonna move on to the next round. Current character is I. We're gonna add I to our array at the count index, which is this one here because count is 1. So let's do that. Direction is false. So let's decrement count. And in step 3, count is equal to 0. So we're gonna assign true to direction. So direction is gonna be equal to true. And then for our 1 to the last round, our current character is gonna be n. We're gonna add n to our array at the count index, which is this one here because count is equal to 0. We're gonna check the value of direction. Direction is true. So we're gonna increment count, and count is not equal to number of rows minus 1 or 0. So we're just gonna ignore this and move on to the final round. In our final round, we're gonna add the current character to our rows array at the count index, which is this one here. So we're gonna increment count. Then we're gonna check if count is equal to number of rows minus 1. Number of rows is 3. So minus 1 is gonna be 2, and 2 is equal to 2. So direction is gonna be false, and we're gonna break from our loop, and in our array, we're gonna have these 3 strings. So as you can see, these 3 strings are actually in our array, and we simply join them together, and this is our result. Now let's code this in the simplest way possible. All right, let's code this. So first, let's define our direction variable that's gonna be equal to true in the beginning. And let's also define our count variable that's going to be equal to 0 in the beginning. We only define 3 variables, and the last one is our array. Let's define it. So rows array is going to be equal to. Now, as you can see, number of rows is actually an input in our function. So the question actually gives us the number of rows. We don't know how many rows we have, but the answer is still the same thing. Our number of rows should be equal to the number of empty strings that we have inside of our array. And this is gonna do exactly that. Don't worry, I'm gonna explain this in a bit. Fill empty strings. So this line is saying make an array and we need num rows elements in it. So for example, if our number of rows is 3, it's gonna make an array that has 3 elements in it because our number of rows is 3, and it's gonna fill it with empty strings. This will literally do this. So it's gonna make 3 empty strings inside of our array. And that's it. All right, let's move on. We're done with all of our variables. So let's define our for loop to loop through the characters that we have. So let I is equal to 0. We wanna loop as long as I is less than the s.length, which is the string that we have that's given to us by the question itself, and then I++, just a simple for loop. Here we're gonna add our 3 simple steps. Our first step was rows array at the index of count is gonna be equal to itself plus s of I. So we're gonna add the current character to the empty string at the count index of our array. Then we're gonna move on to step 2, and we're gonna say if direction is equal to true, count plus plus. So we're incrementing count. Else if direction is equal to false, count minus minus. This is to decrement count. So this is our first step, and this was our second step. Let's move on to the final step. We're gonna say if count is equal to num rows minus 1, make direction be equal to false, and if count is equal to 0, make direction be equal to true. Now you might ask why we have this minus 1 here. It's pretty simple. Let's say our number of rows is 3, and we want to have 3 empty strings in our array. So in real life, when we say row number 1, we actually mean number 1. But in coding, because the index of our array starts from 0, this is actually gonna be the first row, and its index is actually 0. This minus 1 is to solve that problem. Awesome. Believe it or not, we're done. At the end, we're just gonna return our rows array dot join, and this is it. This here joins all of the text that we have inside of our array. Now there's one tiny edge case that we actually gotta cover, and that's if the number of rows were actually equal to 1. So if number of rows is equal to 1, we're just gonna return the string, because think about it. This itself, that's our input, is written in 1 row. So that means we don't have to do anything, and we're just gonna return it here. All right, this is all of our code. Let's test it and see if we're gonna pass our tests. Yep, all 3 accepted. And now, moment of truth. Let's actually submit it and see if we're gonna pass. Come on, come on. There we go. And it's beating 69% of all of the other submissions. Let's analyze our time complexity. And as you can see, it's O of n because we only have 1 loop. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Keep on coding, and catch you in the next one.